Welcome, story lovers. I'm your regular storyteller, here to help you drift into a peaceful sleep. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, share it, and subscribe for more stories that will help you drift off peacefully. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. My name is Lacy and I'm 29 years old. I've been a widow for 6 months now, and the painful truth is that my husband died because of my own stupidity and ignorance. Every single day I live with that guilt. Some nights I barely sleep because the memory of what I did keeps replaying in my head over and over again. I loved my husband deeply, and even now, after everything, I still wish I could go back and undo the terrible mistake that destroyed my life. My husband James married me when I was 25. He was the kind of man most women pray to find. He paid my university tuition, supported me emotionally, cared for me like I was the most important person in the world, and never once made me feel alone. We were inseparable. Everywhere we went, people admired our relationship because of how much love we shared. But over time, I started noticing something disturbing. Especially around married women, there was always jealousy. Some openly admired us, while others secretly hated how close James and I were. Our marriage looked peaceful and full of genuine love, while many people around us were struggling in unhappy relationships. James noticed it too. I still remember him telling me one evening that maybe we should move away from everyone and start fresh somewhere else because too many people seemed uncomfortable seeing us happy. Eventually, we moved out of his family house and relocated to Stowe, where we rented a small apartment. There was another married couple already living there. Since James worked long hours, I spent most of my days alone indoors. After some weeks, the loneliness started getting to me. I barely had friends around anymore, and honestly, I became bored sitting inside every single day waiting for my husband to come home. I often noticed our neighbor's wife sitting alone in the shared living area whenever her husband was away, but I never knew how to approach her. Then one afternoon, our electricity suddenly went out and the apartment became unbearably hot. I stepped outside into the shared living space just to get some fresh air. Less than 2 minutes later, our neighbor's wife walked in, smiling warmly, and jokingly said, "Well, look who finally decided to come outside. I guess the heat forced my indoor neighbor out today." I laughed immediately, and before I realized it, we were having long conversations like we had known each other for years. She was funny, easy to talk to, and made me feel less lonely. That was how our friendship started. As time passed, we became very close. We watched television together, cooked together sometimes, and spent hours talking like sisters. But one morning, everything started changing. James and I heard loud arguing coming from their apartment before her husband stormed out for work. Later that morning, I noticed her sitting quietly in the living room, looking emotionally drained. After James left for work, I sat beside her and gently asked if she was okay. At first she claimed she was fine, but something about her felt different that day. The arguments between her and her husband continued almost daily after that, and eventually I became curious enough to ask her what was really happening in their marriage. That was when she told me a story that completely changed the way I started thinking about relationships. She explained how her relationship had once been perfect too. According to her, everything changed after she became pregnant. She said her husband slowly became colder, distant, and constantly irritated after their child was born. Then she told me something else that stayed in my mind for days. Their child no longer lived with them because her husband had sent the child away to stay with family. The more she spoke, the more afraid I became. I started asking myself painful questions I had never thought about before. Would my relationship with James eventually become like that too? Would he stop loving me one day after we had children? I grew up watching my own parents fight constantly, and the thought of losing the love James had for me terrified me more than anything else in the world. James quickly noticed that something was wrong with me. One evening after returning home from work, he stared at me quietly for a moment before asking, "Are you okay? You seem different lately." I forced a smile and told him I was fine, but deep inside my mind was already becoming poisoned with fear. The next day, while sitting with my neighbor, I started asking her more questions. I asked her if she believed true love eventually disappeared after having children. I asked if every marriage eventually turned into fighting and unhappiness. Then I asked the question that destroyed my life. Is there anything someone can do to make their husband love them forever? That was the moment everything started falling apart. After that conversation, I began calling some of my old friends back home asking for advice. A few of them gave me honest answers. They told me relationships naturally go through difficult seasons and that arguments do not always mean love is gone. But some of the others encouraged my fears instead. They told me there were ways to make a man stay completely attached to you forever. Looking back now, I realized some of those friends had always been jealous of my marriage with James, even before we moved away. I was too blind to see it. My closest friend at the time, Janet, eventually told me she knew someone who could help me protect my marriage permanently. She told me to come visit her so she could take me to a prophet. 2 days later, after James left for work, I packed a few things and traveled to Janet's place. She later took me to meet a man she claimed was a prophet. But honestly, from the moment I saw him, nothing about him felt genuine or trustworthy. Still, I ignored my instincts because fear had already clouded my judgment. Janet explained my situation to him, and the man laughed casually before disappearing into another room. When he returned, he handed me a small white cloth tied tightly around something inside. He told me there was a special substance inside the cloth and instructed me to secretly add a few drops into James's food for 3 days. According to him, after that, James would love only me forever and never leave me emotionally or physically. I had no idea the substance was actually poison. The first night, I added a small amount into James's dinner. Shortly after eating, he rushed to the bathroom feeling sick. The next morning, he looked unusually weak and exhausted before leaving for work. I immediately became worried and called Janet to explain what happened. Instead of being concerned, she laughed and told me the substance was already working. She assured me everything was normal and encouraged me to continue exactly as the so-called prophet instructed. Deep down, something inside me started feeling uneasy. At one point, I even considered tasting the substance myself, just to understand what it was. But then I remembered the prophet specifically told me not to. The second night, I added the substance again. I even cooked James's favorite meal, hoping to make him feel better. But when he got home from work, he immediately went straight to bed, saying he was too tired to eat. I convinced him to at least take a few bites before sleeping. The following morning, he looked even worse. He could barely get ready for work and left the apartment without eating breakfast because he was running late. That day was supposed to be the final time I added the substance to his food. Somewhere in the afternoon, James suddenly returned home saying he felt extremely sick. I panicked and ran to a nearby pharmacy to buy medication for him. After taking the medicine, he fell asleep while I prepared dinner that evening. Usually, James and I always ate together whenever he was home, but that night I intentionally ate alone in the kitchen before bringing his food to him in bed. He even asked me why I wasn't eating with him, and I lied by saying I had been too hungry to wait. He ate quietly, took his medicine afterward, and fell asleep beside me later that night. Then morning came. The morning I wish never happened. I woke up early, prepared breakfast, and returned to our bedroom to wake James so we could eat together before he left for work. But the moment I touched him, something felt wrong immediately. His body felt cold, too cold. I called his name several times while shaking him harder and harder, but he never responded. James wasn't breathing anymore. I screamed for help. Our neighbors rushed into the apartment immediately, and together we carried him into the car, while I drove frantically to the hospital, crying the entire way there. Doctors rushed him inside and performed several tests, while I waited outside completely terrified. After what felt like forever, one of the doctors finally walked toward me with a look on his face that already told me the truth before he even opened his mouth. Then he said the words that destroyed my entire life. "Your husband is dead." The doctor explained that James had ingested a slow-acting poison that severely damaged his heart, and there was nothing they could do to save him. At that exact moment, reality hit me. I realized the substance that man gave me was never meant to strengthen my marriage. It was poison. I had unknowingly murdered the man who loved me more than anyone else ever had. I immediately called Janet, crying uncontrollably, and told her everything. She panicked too, Later she called back saying she had gone to the so-called prophet's house with the police, but by the time they arrived, the man had already disappeared. Neighbors told them he packed up and left the previous afternoon, like he knew exactly what was coming. I walked back into James's hospital room, dropped to my knees beside his bed, and cried harder than I have ever cried in my entire life. I kept apologizing to him over and over again, even though he could no longer hear me. But I never confessed to anyone there what I had actually done. When James's family arrived, the doctors only explained that poison was found in his system. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even look anyone in the eyes. All I could do was cry while carrying the unbearable weight of knowing the truth inside me. James was buried a few days later, and now 6 months later I'm still alone, no husband, no children, no peace. For the past 6 months I haven't been able to move on from what happened, and I've completely refused to marry again. Whether I meant to kill James or not, the truth remains the same. My fear, insecurity, and stupidity destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. And that is something I will have to live with for the rest of my life.